Okay, we're live. Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our independent policy movement for progress to bring power to people like you. With us on the program today, we're going to be talking with U.S. Senate candidate, an independent. His name is Daniel Burke. He's running in New Jersey, and we're going to be getting to learn about his campaign. And furthermore, on top of that, we're going to be having a little conversation towards the end of our dialogue today about universal basic income. Daniel is not yet on board with universal basic income, and so we want to have a friendly dialogue to see where we can find some common ground between us on that subject. So with that being said, let's get into that, guys. Okay, yeah. So there was a little bit of a lag there, but Daniel, I gotta say, I'm really looking forward to today's episode. Welcome so much to the Hill of Roses here.
Thank you very much, John. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, we've been having some correspondence for a while as you are running for the U.S. Senate in New Jersey up until very recently, and I got to vote in the primary. I was a resident of New Jersey, and so it was great to get to know your campaign, and so I figured I'd love to bring you on, and you happen to be someone who is not fully on board yet with universal basic income, so I wanted to have a discussion with you on that subject, being that that's one of the top priorities here of the Hill of Roses. So before we get into that part of today's conversation with universal basic income debate, let's get to know you and your campaign a little bit first. What inspired you to run for the U.S. Senate and particularly run as an independent? How long have you been doing that so far?
Well, I launched my campaign in June of 2019 on the 50th anniversary of the landing of Americans on the moon.
Oh.
And this was at a major conference that was hosted by an organization that I work closely with, the LaRouche Political Action Committee. And that's basically been my inspiration point, is that there is an absolute need for some mission for the United States and for the world that will carry us into the next 50 years of human progress, which means we need the most advanced forms of technology, of manufacturing, and of scientific breakthroughs, and that's going to be done through space science foremost. So I'm incredibly excited about the NASA launch to Mars recently, about the Chinese probe that was sent to Mars, and particularly about the Artemis program to bring humanity back to the moon by 2024, and then eventually send humanity to Mars. And my campaign has been organized around an idea that this is the kind of optimistic vision which we need to solve the critical issues that we're dealing with today, which I think include the threat of war, world war even. They include the danger of a major financial crash like happened 12 years ago, happening again, but much worse. And generally the political chaos that we have with what I see as a major attack on the presidency by CIA, FBI, and other sort of secret government apparatus.
So I have to ask, can you help define for us a little bit better what the LaRouche movement is?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So we're like incredibly controversial. So you're going to look up Lyndon LaRouche and you're going to say, oh, he's a cult member or a leader, and he's also an anti-Semite and a fascist and a communist and everything bad all at the same time. And the reason for that is that Mr. LaRouche, who is an American activist and economist who ran for president 8 times, and he died last year, 2019, in February, he was a great opponent of the financial oligarchy, essentially. The people who have been running both sides of the game, and that's part of why I'm not a Democrat or Republican, because I think both of them are Wall Street puppets. And I'm what we're organized around, what Mr. LaRouche's major idea was the industrialization of the third world, going back to the 1970s. He said there's absolutely no reason that people should be living in extreme poverty, and that we can organize the world economy so that every nation can collaborate for the common aims of humanity.
Okay, so I have to ask you, in terms of the reasons why the two-party duopoly, this is something we get to talk about a lot on the program, but what are the processes within our government that you feel are broken that have left these two parties unsalvageable and a need to run as an independent instead?
Well, I really consider myself a Franklin Roosevelt Democrat, or a John Kennedy Democrat, perhaps, or a Lincoln Republican. I mean, I think that there are tremendous capabilities from these individuals in our history who contributed the most beautiful and necessary ideas for today. But what happened was that, one after another, there was betrayal. You and I had a brief conversation on Twitter about Obama. I was someone who considered myself a Democrat for my whole life, and then I campaigned to impeach Obama because I thought that his wars, the regime change wars, were the most heinous things, and the whole thing that people got excited about was he would be different from Bush, and it wasn't. We committed really serious crimes, including the destruction of Libya. And it was around that time that I said, no more. So I would say these regime change wars would be a great place to start if you want to see the corruption of both parties.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that point of this is unfortunately a negative side to bipartisanship sometimes. This is kind of a hallmark. This is always lauded in the media. When you get bipartisanship, oh, you did something good. Compromise was made. But you know what? Sometimes it's to carry out an agenda that's not aligned with the people and not helpful for the people too. And, we did have that conversation beforehand. And I think it is an interesting dynamic of, working within the party and sometimes having these guardrails that you have to be kind of a little cautious of versus getting to work from outside the party and frankly, get to have a little bit more free reign on levying criticism. And I love to hear in your perspective, what kind of is needed for independents like yourself to have better prospects in these elections? I think a lot of people feel as if they're forced to vote for either Democrat or Republican usually. What do you think is needed to break that mindset?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure. I'm really not sure, but I can say that there's got to be some sort of major historic change either we're gonna go in the right direction or we're going to hell. We're just going to hell right now. I think that the strategic system in the world has become extremely precarious. There's a grave threat that war might break out in Southwest Asia, the so-called Middle East, that would suddenly lead to confrontation between the U.S. on one side, Russia, China on the other side. In the meanwhile, the U.S.-China relationship is collapsing, and it's extremely dangerous. The fact that not that either side says, "Oh, we want to have thermonuclear war," but that it ends up happening by accident. World wars are not planned; they sort of get triggered because the chessboard has been set. And right now, I think that we're in that kind of chessboard. So I guess I'm bringing this all up to give a perspective that, if we're going to create independent thought in the United States, it had better be around a global vision, not a globalist vision, but a global vision of
Sure.
nations working together to prevent the worst from happening and create a better future.
Okay. So I wanted to ask one more question before going into universal basic income, one of the main focuses of today. I wanted to ask you, you said the big vision that you think is going to cause a lot of advancement for our society is through space exploration. Why do you think that is the ambitious goal that we need to be undertaking to help solve our issues compared to something like a climate change, which has that global implication already? Maybe they're not mutually exclusive, but why is space exploration the big mission for you?
Okay, well, first of all, I think that it is undoubtedly the most noble mission that a nation could have, that humanity can have, because the quest to bring greater and greater understanding of the unknown, and to actually spread not just humanity, but life itself to other worlds is, it's just the most exciting and beautiful next step for the human species, I think, that exists. In the same sense that, the fish came out of the water and became land-based animals. We're going to go out from beyond this sort of, the womb of the earth, and we're going to go out and into the world, so to speak, into the universe.
Okay.
So that's the philosophical basis for it, and I think it will actually, give people a more profound sense of what it means to be human. That it's something much higher than how we normally think about it. But then in the economic sphere, all you got to do is take a look at the Apollo mission. What a remarkable breakthrough for the United States economy and for the world. In fact, a group called Chase Econometrics did a study that showed that every dollar that went into the space program yielded 10 in terms of a return. And that was because of the creation of new sciences, new scientific breakthroughs, new technologies that were able to be applied throughout the civilian economy. And that's really what we need right now. We need something that advances the whole context of the economy, which is something that I think goes to our discussion coming up on UBI, because it seems to me that Yang's argument leaves out that crucial next step. He says it's a transition, the UBI process is a transition, but to what? This is what I think it is. To what? To a revolution in technological capabilities that will come with a focus on the industrialization of the moon and Mars.
Okay, so two things I'd love to follow up there before going to UBI is kind of getting like a status check of where you think we are on that vision. What would you say is that maybe hypothetical year that you would target for the idea of something like colonization? And what have been your thoughts from this past year when they have been recently releasing some information about UFOs and there's been some unclassified information there? How has that made you feel? Do you feel like we already have life out there that we're aware of?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to have to think deeply about that. But I do think that life is probably not something that is merely an isolated phenomenon, but that is a sort of a principle of the universe. And so it's got to be, there's a part of me that says it's got to be out there and we will find it. As for the UFOs, I presume this is some kind of military intelligence psyop that's being used to, like,
it's a noteworthy distraction at a minimum.
Yeah, that's
yeah, and you know what? I could maybe believe the UFO. I don't know if I'm believing the aliens we know about yet. Like, there could be some secret flight technology that we've been developing that might go out there every now and then. But I'm a little skeptical that we've been just storing some aliens off in Area 51 for a while. But with that being said, I want to transition to the second part of today's conversation, which is around universal basic income, as you alluded to, and have a little bit of a conversation around this. Unlike a debate where we have a moderator to break in, the way I just wanted to handle this debate today is have a little bit Socratic method here. I want to understand what your concerns with it are already and try and dive into those a little bit more. So, Daniel, what is the main reason you don't think universal basic income is a needed solution to address poverty in America?
Well, the key issue that I see with it is that it is an effort to sidestep the actual things that need to be changed in the U.S. economy and in the world economy. Namely, the plan that I have endorsed, which is the LaRouche PAC plan for 50 million new productive American jobs and 1.5 billion new productive jobs in the world, that actually takes it by the horns, which is that if we are dealing with a problem caused by automation, which is the major claim that's made at the forefront of every single argument that I've seen Andrew Yang make about UBI, then the question is, does automation really, is it bad for the U.S. economy? And I am telling you right now, I'm staking my claim, increases in the capability of machinery, increases in automation are good, so long as you continue progress and use that as a new platform for new and better industries and technologies and so on and so forth. And that's what's being blocked in this country. Specifically, to your earlier question, things like nuclear by someone like Tom Steyer. When Mike Schellenberger out in California has made a very explicit case that if you believe that carbon emissions are the most important thing in terms of our future well-being, you would be pro-nuclear. But for some reason, there's a major political effort to prevent it from becoming a major U.S. industry. But we could do so much in the world if we rebuild our nuclear power industry and export nuclear power plants across the world. So, pardon me. Go ahead. That's what.
Yeah. So I get some of the argument that you're making here is that essentially work programs in themselves are going to be the transformation that the economy is needed, and that automation is not something that needs to be solved with universal basic income. So two things I would say to that is, first, I don't think that the sole basis for universal basic income's justification lies at the feet of automation and being a solution solely to that. I think that it certainly can be something that would help. It is something that would be beneficial to anyone who does not existingly have work, but I don't believe that's the end-all be-all for solving it. The second thing is that I don't disagree with you on the need for work programs in addition to that. Especially, we can agree on nuclear as well. I think those are things we can all agree on. I believe that the case for universal basic income is that, one, those jobs programs are not going to be suitable for everyone. We know that there are going to be certain people who are not built for these infrastructure style projects. We know that it is going to be good to give some people jobs, but it's not going to be suitable for everyone. And secondly, on top of that, there is the notion of just simply saying not everyone can even work. Not just they don't have the capability, the training, or the need, but there is this disabled community who cannot work as well. And in my vision, I think universal basic income is the best to deal with people who are out of work, give people who are already working the ability to have additional leverage and an income raise. And it's going to help people who don't want to be working at their current job and want to be able to take that risk to be able to start new enterprises and have a little bit of an income stabilization from that. And so I'd love to hear, in your opinion, why you believe this works program is mutually exclusive from a universal basic income, because you're saying you don't think it solves this problem. And so I'm looking to say, well, what if this is not trying to solve that problem? Can they help each other in tandem?
So, my approach onto this begins from the standpoint of Franklin Roosevelt's Bill of Economic Rights from, I believe, the 1944 State of the Union address, in which he delineates, I strongly agree with what he states there, that people have the right to a useful and remunerative job in industry, shops, farms, mines of the nation. They have right to earn enough to provide adequate food, clothing, and recreation. He says a number of things in here. And he also says you have to have adequate protection from economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment. So if we're talking about ensuring that people who have some reason that they cannot work are defended, then I surely agree with that. And direct government payments are going to be a part of it. I think that that's natural. That's quite natural. We've been doing that, and we should do it on an expanded scale, because it's absolutely the case that people are living in a remarkable poverty. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I moved to New Jersey about 10 years ago. And in Dallas, I think there's 115,000 children who are in poverty. And those people should be defended and protected. I think we need not jobs programs per se, but poverty eradication in the United States. We need to eradicate poverty. So I state this because I understand the problems that you just mentioned that we would like to have solved, inclusive of people being able to receive credit such that they can, some kind of a low interest rate loan so that they can take new risks and become entrepreneurs. I surely support that as a general capability. You're saying that they need to be able to that they should receive it as UBI. Okay, I think that the basic goal of giving people the freedom to do that is important. But the major thing that I'm saying is that this is missing the point, which is that we are in a collapse of the manufacturing capability of the United States. And that's not just something that's bad for the people who are manufacturing jobs. That means that the US economy no longer produces. And we're going to just continue to slide into a situation where we have a financial and technocratic overclass of billionaires and so forth, and people are treated like dirt, which is what's increasingly happening. So in order to change that dynamic, I don't think that we need to, pull a little bit more from Amazon, get some crumbs from Amazon and Google. I think that we actually need to change the U.S. economy so that we are creating tens of millions of new productive jobs. And I'll give you one point on this. We need a better healthcare system, which requires not merely reversing this disastrous HMO process and then, the bad elements of Obamacare, but it means to actually build new hospitals. Under FDR's policy, we had 4.5, I believe, 4.5 beds, hospital beds per 1,000 person, and now that's down to about 2.9. So that could be a huge project to put people to work. I think there's a lot of people who could be employed, like Roosevelt did with the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Eventually, he employed about 3 million people over the course of that program, who were largely youth, who were uneducated and unskilled, and he employed them rapidly to do things like build up the national park system, of course, and to build the massive infrastructure projects of the New Deal. We could easily do the same thing with a big focus on space science and advanced technological, advanced manufacturing, essentially.
Yeah, and here's the difficult part, because we don't disagree at all on that part, because I do think there's a very strong necessity for jobs programs in a lot of these key areas of investment. I think the problem that I have is the dependence on that as the sole measure of anti-poverty measures. And you might say there are more. You just mentioned healthcare, for example. That's a broken system we need to repair. But I think universal basic income is one of the best ways to try and dissolve that kind of power structure. As you said, you clarified it as crumbs. I would say it's a lot more than crumbs. It's kind of a negotiating power for you to be able to reject potentially one job offer, to be able to start your own business, be able to find a new job that's in a little less of an abusive situation. And it makes it so that instead of a jobs guarantee being potentially the only way to get yourself out of poverty, you have this method where you can say no to that offer at first, because otherwise you're going to just have this work system where you're going to be working for the state as your only method of escaping poverty. How do you try to address that potential lack of freedom in trying to escape poverty by just forcing a work option? Do you believe we should solely be making our income through labor like that?
Well, I mean, I think that people, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. People want a mission. They want to do something with their lives that contributes to others, and particularly to the United States as a nation, and also to the world. When I look at the world, I see incredible difficulties between the places that are war-torn and suffering mass starvation, like in Yemen, and places that are suffering from idiotic and insane U.S. sanctions, and like Syria and Lebanon, of course, and I see that there's been a failure to industrialize and develop the nations of the formerly colonized nations. The areas of the world, so that Africa is in this abysmal condition, and people just act like, oh, that's how Africa is. Now, the connection to what I'm talking about is that if the United States government had a commitment to the economic development of other countries in collaboration with perhaps China, which is currently doing that through the Belt and Road Initiative, then we could actually have something to be proud of, and people would want to wake up in the morning and go to the factory where we build the high-speed trains that we're going to ship to Kenya. And that would actually be a good reason to be an American, which is fantastic.
I wholly agree with you. I'd love to hear, Daniel, I think the struggle I'm having is what makes, in your opinion, this a mutually exclusive endeavor? Because I think we're on the same page, but in my opinion, I think we can do both. And so I'd love to hear, in your opinion, why you think we could not do both.
I appreciate you trying to nail me down on this, but I'm trying to take I'm trying to address the assumptions.
Okay.
Because, as I said, if it is in the pandemic, it is for example, it is absolutely necessary that Americans receive direct payments from the government, and it's totally appropriate, and I have absolutely no problem with that. But I've studied the presentations of Andrew Yang, not in depth, but I have studied them, and I've studied his website, and I've looked everywhere for something that actually talks about a legitimate plan for American infrastructure, for example, and it's not there. Or
go ahead, finish your point. Sorry.
Pardon me. I'd like to deal with one particular assumption that he indicates in many of the comments that he's made publicly about this, which is that because of the fact that Amazon and Google and so forth don't manage to avoid paying taxes, that we're going to sort of work around that by forcing the value-added tax on them. Not that I'm against taxing them, but he points to the problem without addressing it, namely that we have a mass tax evasion system in the world, which is run out of places like the Cayman Islands, and that shouldn't exist. The idea that we just sort of have to submit to the fact that 75% of the world's hedge funds are registered in the Cayman Islands and their finances are completely secret, and that these are the places where holding companies are set up so that Amazon doesn't have to pay any money, it's just lunatic. And it's very directly relevant today. Think about the Epstein scandal. Who's a major player in that? Prince Andrew. The British Crown runs the Cayman Islands. They literally run the Cayman Islands. It's their territory. So the corruption that you see in the face of an Epstein is the corruption that I'm talking about. And if we don't face up to it and end the system of offshore money, sucking up the money by these offshore international financial oligarchical institutions, then I don't think we're going to have a republic for much longer.
Yeah, and I want to wholeheartedly agree with you on identifying that as a problem, because you're absolutely right that we have this problem where it's not just that we need to put new taxes on them. We need, when we put a tax on someone, they actually pay it. And I think you're right. That is something I would like to see Andrew Yang, as you said beforehand, talk about more, because I do think he is short on that. I would have disagreed, which is where I was trying to interject beforehand about the infrastructure part. I think he certainly had this idea of using infrastructure, particularly like self-sustaining communities, with his Builders and Destroyers program, which would have taken 10% of the military budget, roughly $71.8 billion, and used that for infrastructure projects around the nation. Do I think that he does enough of that big vision setting of what is the mission's objective to the manufacturer? No, I would say he could go further, and I think that would be an interesting thing to say. But I think universal basic income goes beyond that automation lens that he kind of focuses in on. And I think that, frankly, this is the problem where it's like we do need to have a vision setting, but that comes from a very like the government must be the decider of what is the big mission for the country. What universal basic income kind of does is it says, okay, we know there are a lot of things that these problems that need to be solved in communities. We think you on an individualistic level can best solve those issues in a lot of ways. You're on the ground. Like, for instance, you're not going to have a program out there that's going to help you fix a car tire. Like, you need a car to go from point A to B. But you could do it for healthcare. Universal basic income kind of fills in those gaps where you're not going to be able to have a government program solve it, nor, people potentially being left behind by jobs programs. Like, one of the things I wanted to ask you about this jobs program is, how do you try to adapt it over time with automation in it? Do you have it as just a jobs program, or would you classify it more as a jobs guarantee?
Well, I recognize that I use this phrase, we need jobs. Yeah. But I want to specify that, and I reference the CCC, which is a jobs program.
Yeah.
But my concept of this, which I get again from the LaRouche PAC plan for 1.5 billion jobs and 50 million American jobs, is not as such a jobs program. The idea is we need to, the Federal Reserve printed like $4 trillion, now $6 trillion actually since March. And that money is being created for the purpose of propping up speculative assets.
Yeah.
It's going into the Wall Street markets, it's going into international banks and propping up their assets, including like $1.8 quadrillion of derivatives, which are totally worthless.
Yeah, they're not investing that money particularly well right now. It's why I kind of like UBI. It's like a tax on government itself. It says for every dollar you tax, you got to let it out as a dividend back to the people.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but the primary thing that I'm trying to communicate is that we need a much bigger concept on how we're going to apply directed credit to national infrastructure projects. And that the key thing is not the jobs produced by the projects, although that's a wonderful effect. The key thing is the projects. Because, for example, we have a disastrous system in the western part of the United States in terms of water, and in the Midwest as well. Oh, yeah. We have a very poor water management system relative to our needs. We haven't basically built anything big since 40 years ago, at least, if not 50. And so we were, I'm talking about the policy at NWAPA, the North American Water and Power Alliance, to bring water down from Alaska into through Canada into the United States and even down to Mexico, all the way down to the Rio Grande. And this would make a tremendous advance in our capability to manage our territory. It would mean we'd be able to build new cities in the western parts of the United States. So the interest of the program that I'm talking about is, where do we want the world to be in 50 years? What do we want the United States to look like in 50 years? And to my mind, it means you need physical solutions to the problems that we have, which take the form of mega projects of infrastructure primarily, and enormous focus on the advances of science that would create the revolution necessary for, as you say, what comes after. You know, like what's coming up next that would actually bring the people who are not getting the jobs that are being automated, for example, and give them something else to do or to be a part of. So that's things like fusion energy, for example, is vastly underfunded in the United States, and in other places, particularly China, there's a major focus on funding this most important new breakthrough in energy science.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Like 100%, we need to be investing in this science. I think we're maybe getting kind of like back to the debate mindset, and maybe we don't disagree as much as we do, is I'm wondering, do you just think it's not like the best investment of the money? Like, because in my mind, I see these completely as working together. And that's where I get to, because I think you're right. We need to invest in these big vision things, but then I think we also need to be investing strategically directly into the people as well, because I think they can solve some of the problems that government's not going to have that level of oversight to solve. So do you see that as true, that they are mutually exclusive, or could that be something that works in tandem with your projects that you want to have focus on?
I guess that the way that I'm thinking about it is, I would like to recruit you to my policies.
See, but we agree though. That's the thing. Like, I can wholeheartedly get behind the idea of investing in these scientists. I just want to go further.
No. So we have established some common ground.
Yeah,
and therefore,
exactly.
Therefore, we can have further discussions about this and exchange it. And on that basis, I would be able to assent to the incorporation of UBI, or so to speak, and address of it. In fact, I do know a prominent professor in Italy named Michele Geraci, who is the Undersecretary of Economics for in a recent government of Italy, who talked about the UBI program that they have in Italy. And among the things that they specify is that you get a debit card, and you can only use it, or I've heard him speak about it, so forgive me if this is not exactly how it's been applied. Sure. But you can only use such a debit card for things like food and healthcare and a handful of other essential goods and services that are needed by every family. And I think that that's an interesting modification of it. So because we need to support people's ability to live a productive life. If we can lift them out of the feeling of despair that has caused so many excess deaths in the United States, which is causing our mortality rate to go up, it's causing our longevity to go down. People are killing themselves with alcohol. They're killing themselves with opioids. They're just languishing in parts of the country that have been totally forgotten and left behind. And I want them to be mobilized. I want them to have some sense that they're cared for. And so if UBI is applied in a way such that it does that, while being under the umbrella, in my view, of the far more important question of establishing a mission for the manufacturing, for the scientific and technological breakthroughs needed to change the whole economy, then I think we can succeed. But I'm wary of people of the focus on UBI, because I do think that ultimately, if there's merely a focus on that there's a sort of a obeisance to the tech companies and the idea that the next 50 years of the United States is going to be run by Google. And that is like a nightmarish society beyond belief, inclusive of the surveillance state that is clearly completely wedded to Google and Amazon and all of those companies.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. That's why I do think it is just the floor. Like, you got to build on top of that with potentially the antitrust measures. This is something that I think Andrew Yang himself could go a little bit further on in combating that corporate power. And I do think you're absolutely right. You do need to vision set where we're going to be trying to solve the problems. Money into people's hands is going to solve more of the individualistic problems, but we have national problems that we need to innovate our way out of. And I think you're right that we need to focus on that. And I personally think universal basic income works with jobs programs, and I think it works with universal basic services too, like healthcare, as you mentioned beforehand. With that being said, let's go to a couple fan questions before we wrap up here. Let's see. What is the first question we want to go with? Let's go with this question here. Wait, UPI? No, that's not it. I clicked on the wrong one. Where is this one? I had seen this question beforehand that I had really liked. Okay, nope. Now, this is just a space question in general. I'll go with this while I'm going through. I wanted to hear, are you a Captain Kirk, a Picard, or are you a Star Wars type of guy? Because I think we got to go with a couple of fun questions while we're out here. So let's go with space here.
Okay. You know who I really like on space? It's not popular. I'm not into Star Trek or Star Wars, sure. But Kraft Erica, the guy who designed and contributed majorly to the designing of the Saturn V rocket, German-American space scientist. He died in 1986. Total genius. And he wrote a short story about the first human colony on Mars. And he described this whole process, this whole buildup, and the transformation of society. One of the things that really stands out to me about what he said was that he said, I'm a German-American. I was born in Germany. My children have a completely different identity because they are German-American. They were born in the United States. Imagine the first generation of people born on the moon, because I do think that will happen and not too far from now. And what kind of identity will they have?
It's very true. It's certainly new ground we're breaking, and it is a little cynical, but if we do reach that point, you do become a little less dependent on one planet. Like, you can have migration patterns, which would reduce, some of the climate change demands. But I'm glad to hear that, because I do think it's something important. I just worry about, is it worth the short-term investment when I feel like we're still a far way off? Like, I'm curious, do you have like a timetable in your mind that you think this is feasible?
Well, I mean, NASA is presently talking about a 2033-ish manned launch to Mars. And basically, you would need a couple of things to accomplish this. And let me stress that we don't need Captain Kirk or Picard, because we have Jim Bridenstine, who is one of the most important public figures in the United States today, the administrator of NASA, who has been fighting tooth and nail to keep this program going so that we actually return human beings to the moon by 2024. So I have a 2-year-old daughter. She's going to be 6 years old. She's going to see human beings walk on the moon, and that's what her life is going to be like, instead of my life, where I was 14 years old and I walked into math class and they told me that the World Trade Center had been hit by airplanes, and that was what my political life has been about for the past 20 years. So that's what the future is that I think we can create. The timeline is defined by whether we can develop fusion rockets. Presently, Elon Musk is talking about sending, people to Mars with chemical rockets, essentially. That takes 9 months. But if we have nuclear rockets, nuclear fission, you can get there in about 3 months. If you have nuclear fusion rockets, thermonuclear fusion rockets would get us there within a matter of weeks. Mm-hmm. Even in a very, very short amount of time. And that's something that they're working on at MIT, at labs all across the world. I've sat down with someone who has a fusion propulsion startup in New York City, of all places. And, this is something that could be done within a very short amount of time if we had a crash program. Under the Manhattan Project, we had a crash program. We applied something like $5-6 billion per year, adjusted for inflation, for just that. And imagine if we if we doubled NASA's input, NASA's budget we could accomplish so much. I guarantee it. And you'd inspire so many young scientists and engineers to change the world. And finally, I'll say that if you think to yourself, well, gee, that might not be worth it, that might be too much money. Well, you know who's been putting that out and putting it into the mouths of certain congressmen, both Republicans and Democrats, is Michael Bloomberg, like the #1 Mr. Technocrat oligarch who has seriously been financing candidates who are attacking the funding of NASA, which is presently a serious problem.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that's a great transition. Our next guest asked what your thoughts are on Tulsi, but I wanted to expand this. Who were you looking at during this past presidential primaries? I know you're an independent, but independents often interact with the two parties. Was there any particular presidential candidate you were looking at favorably?
Okay, well, #1, I love Tulsi, and I've had a chance to meet her a couple of times. I have strong disagreements with her, and I should elucidate clearly that I do not think that we should pursue policies like the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is absolutely not what I'm talking about, because that's the destruction of the nuclear policy and replacing it with lower energy dense technologies like solar and wind.
The OFF Act too that Tulsi proposed, yeah.
So I disagree with Tulsi on that. I disagree with the Green New Deal strongly. I think it's a really disastrous policy. But I love the fact that she stands up and that she has had the courage to do this specifically against the new Cold War, against Russia and China, as she puts it. I mean, I watched her when she was a congresswoman challenging the Secretary of Defense. I think Ash, his name escapes me, Ash Carter, under Obama. And she specifically said to him, how many people would die in a nuclear war with Russia? Can you tell me that, sir? And he hems and he haws, and she says, yeah, but you must have an estimate. How many Americans would die and how many people generally would die if we had nuclear war with Russia? Because they go around acting like...
Yeah, it's like hundreds of millions.
Yeah, exactly. You would have extinction of the human race in all likelihood. Yeah. It's a clear possibility, but this is used as the basis for our national defense policy, that we should build up against Russia and China and be prepared for nuclear war. It's insane. We should change that.
And we currently, I think I looked this up recently, I think we're spending around $34.3 billion annually on maintaining our nuclear arsenal, which is around half of the total worldwide spending on nuclear. So yeah, I do agree. It would be helpful if we started dismantling a little bit of our nuclear program, not on the energy side, on the weaponry side.
Amen. Amen.
Okay, let's go to our next question here. This is kind of in a similar vein. People really liking the space side that you brought today. How do you think we make space cool again? Like, what inspired you to fall in love with this idea of space in general?
Well, I owe that to Lyndon LaRouche, the economist and statesman, and because he just gave me this sense that there's an era not far off by any means, which is an era in which human individuals will have a much nobler sense of their own purpose in the world, in which there will be a much greater sense of the significance of the human species itself and the mission that we carry out together immortally. Because unlike any other species, we have the potential to be immortal because we improve ourselves and we make advancements that no other species is capable of making voluntarily. Now, and so I'll give you this image. There is the only Syrian who ever went into space. He went as a cosmonaut in the 1980s. When he came back, he said, we should send all of the bad people to space. Now, he didn't mean send them there forever. He said, send them up into space, bring them back down, and by the time they get back down, they'll have looked on the planet and have had such a profound sense of the singular unity of the human species that they will become better human beings.
Yeah, and I mean, it reminds me of like Independence Day. I think there's a unifying factor to it. Like when you have that almost existential challenge or threat, it kind of is that needed unity factor. And I feel like we are so divided right now, especially in the 2020. I completely realized I passed over asking beforehand. I asked like, who were you supportive of? You told me about Tulsi and what you agreed with her. Did you have anyone you did like particularly from this past primary cycle?
I like Trump.
Like Trump, okay.
Yeah, I like Trump. I mean, he has. Now, let me put it this way. Let me be very strong in what I mean to say. If we're going to address the crisis in world relations to which I've been referring, I absolutely think that we need to have a situation where the US president can sit down with the leaders of Russia, China, and India, and many other nations and actually have, a powwow and figure out what we're going to do about the fact that the world's in a huge pandemic, a global economic crisis, and that we have to work together to solve this, or else millions of people are going to die unnecessarily in the developing world. For example, not only from COVID-19, but from famines. The head of the UN World Food Program, whose name is David Beasley, he says that there's a danger of 300,000 people dying per day if the food systems break down the way that they could without appropriate measures taken. So if we're focused on conflict with Russia and China, which is what I see from both Democrats and Republicans, with the exception of Tulsi and a handful of other people, and there's this, then I think we're doomed. And I think a big part of that has been that people have run this completely lying Russiagate against Trump. People saw the news today. There's this FBI lawyer who is pleading guilty because of the fact that he lied on the FISA warrant by claiming that, or I believe that's what it is, the FISA warrant, the document, he lied on a document by omitting the fact that Carter Page was actually an informant for the U.S. intelligence, and thereby got got surveillance on him. And we started up this whole lying Russiagate business, which includes the lie that Russia hacked the DNC. I've done a number of campaign events with Bill Binney, the former technical director of the NSA, who has surely proven this. He's very clearly forensically proven no Russian hack of the DNC. And so I think that to the extent that Trump fights against what I see as a kind of a secret government, kind of a CIA, FBI attempted takeover of the U.S. executive branch, then I think he's doing the right thing. And to the extent that he says we need to have cooperation with other major powers, regardless of whether someone's going to call them dictators, I also agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, Trump has certainly been a unique foreign policy entity. I don't know if there's necessarily a consistency to it. Some of it does seem like just taking opportune timing on certain things and going back and forth. But I do agree, he honestly, in certain regards, like interventionism, he tends to be a little bit stronger than some of the Democratic candidates. I do think there were some Democratic candidates that were superior to Trump because they embraced that aspect too. But Daniel, let's go with one last question as we wrap up here. I think it fits in tune with what the subject was today. So at the end of today's conversation, do you believe that there is any form of UBI coupled with your program that could be a net positive for the people?
Yeah, I do believe so. And I'm going to give my polemical answer, okay. Which is to say that the form of UBI in which the fundamental problems to which Andrew Yang refers in his public presentation of the case for UBI, in many regards, of course, he made a case that's been going around on Joe Rogan's program. But if you go to his website and you read what he has written there under the freedom dividend, the problems to which he refers, which cause him to argue for the UBI, must be resolved. And you cannot bandage them over with UBI. The problem is a technocratic, oligarchy of super billionaires from Silicon Valley and Wall Street who have been participating in the carving out of the U.S. economy and the financialization of it, creating massive, massive bubble that is set to burst and is going to destroy working families unless we take appropriate measures. And so I'll list those briefly, and then that would, with these measures taken, then I'm for UBI. Okay. Number one, Glass-Steagall. We need to reinstate the Glass-Steagall separation. That would mean that we would make it illegal for there to be any more speculative bailouts. We'd make it impossible, and we would force these major banks to go through a bankruptcy reorganization process where they would have to show their hand, and we would see what's good, what's a good debt, and what's a crap debt, and you're going to be responsible for the crap ones, even if it means that you go through bankruptcy. Secondly, I think we need a national bank or something that operates on those principles, like the Reconstruction Finance Corporation of Franklin Roosevelt, by which we funded a large number of the New Deal infrastructure projects. And that could mean that we would basically nationalize the Federal Reserve. Because right now, why is it that $6 trillion was printed, but not a single productive job was created? And so if we could change the charter of the Federal Reserve so that it was extending credit to private companies, which would be contracted to build these mega projects of infrastructure, then we would have a way of financing them. Number three, I think we need these huge projects that are actually going to increase the overall productivity of our economy. Water systems, power systems, specifically nuclear power, and high-speed trains. I'm calling for at least 17,000 miles of new electrified high-speed trains and 41,000 miles of electrified rail. And finally, a commitment to space science and fusion energy, which would really launch the next era of humanity.
Well, I can't speak for Andrew himself, but I'm on board for that shared cause that has UBI along with all those regulations. Well, Daniel, I want to thank you so much for answering my and my fans' questions today. Is there anything you would like them to be able to take as an action if they enjoyed hearing you today?
Well, thank you. First of all, follow me on Twitter, engage with me on Twitter. I'll be having a campaign event this coming Wednesday. And if you go to my website, you can sign up by email. To hit join, put your email in, and you'll get an email about it, and also make a contribution and help me get this message out. But I really want to thank you very much, Jon. It's been a pleasure.
Daniel, thank you so much. And everyone, if you want to be able to find that, we have the website scrolling across the bottom of the page. Please go follow Daniel. Please check out his website. There are a ton of policies we didn't get to cover today, and we would love to have you back again sometime, Daniel, to be able to do that. So I hope you have a great rest of your evening, man.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, everyone, that was Daniel Burke. So we had ourselves a little bit of an interesting conversation on the subject of universal basic income, as well as so much of the necessary causes of setting a mission, a big mission, and frankly, getting all the innovation of just trying to pursue that goal. We really do need to focus on more than just universal basic income. I would argue that it is going to do a large amount of benefit to lift our heads up and be able to set those future setting missions. But we're very appreciative of Daniel taking the time today to be able to talk with us about his campaign, as well as the subject of universal basic income. With that being said, please, if you like today's video, share it online so other people can learn about Daniel, hear this conversation on universal basic income, and frankly, learn about the need to set bigger missions. Like this video. This is how we know if videos are doing well. Subscribe to the channel. You'll be notified whenever a new video is coming up. We produce videos every Monday to Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern time, so look forward to that. And here's some of the upcoming content that we have coming for next week. So on Monday, we'll be talking with Christine Olivio. She's a congressional candidate from Florida's 24th district. Unlike our guest that we had from this past week of Sakina Latola, she is actually running as an independent, while Sakina was running as a Democrat. So we look forward to talking to her about Florida's 24th district and her campaign. On top of that, we have on Tuesday, we've rescheduled with Mia Mason. She's a congressional candidate from Maryland's 1st district. So we look forward to talking with her. Then on Wednesday, we'll be talking with Kara Eastman. She's a congressional candidate from Nebraska's 2nd district. And then from there, we'll be talking with another congressional candidate. We have a really full schedule with congressional candidates next week. We'll be talking with Meg Gorman from Tennessee's 3rd district. And then finally on Friday, every other week, we're going to be taking off on Fridays with our debates on the every other week. So next Friday, we'll be off. But then the Friday after that, we'll be having another debate, which I'll be looking to set up a candidate supporter debate. I'll be looking for a supporter from Trump, a supporter from Joe Biden, a supporter from Howie Hawkins, and a supporter from Joe Jorgensen to be able to do debate together. So everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today to The Hill of Roses, getting to listen to Daniel Burke and our debate on universal basic income. I hope you guys are staying safe out there during this pandemic and still the ongoing protests. I love you all for tuning in. And until next time, I hope you guys stay rosy out there.